Hi there, y'all, and welcome to Millennial Travels, a series on fun experiences in must-see destinations. The location for this episode is... So let's get right into it. So after 2 successful trips, I wanted to switch it up and go to an island. With that in mind, I booked my ticket for another journey, but this time it was going to be a weekend trip, and I'd be playing with Frontier's 24-hour booking window. Whereas the previous journeys, those are basically where I had the early booking promo. The flight itself was pretty smooth and almost made me fall asleep a few times. Eventually I landed a little after midnight in San Juan, where I got to experience some of the on and off again showers. When I arrived at the hotel, it started to rain a bit heavier. I was wanting to hurry up a bit because of that rain, so I went to what I thought was the entrance of the hotel. Unfortunately, all the doors on this side, at least the side I was on, were locked, and I didn't have service on my phone to make a call to the hotel. After pacing for about maybe 15 minutes, I decided to walk around the building to hopefully find some kind of door so I could knock on it. Well, the real entrance was on the right-hand corner of this building, so the mini disaster was averted. With about 5 hours of rest, I woke up somewhat early to get groceries from the local public store to have breakfast sandwiches for the next coming mornings. Along the way, I stopped by 787 Cafe to get some iced coffee for some quick energy before I booked my Uber for Old Town. After a short ride, I arrived at Plaza Colón, where I took a selfie by the I Love San Juan sign, took a pic of this monument, and scoped out the buildings before I set off for the main attraction on my list. So the mission for this day was to see the Castillo San Felipe del Morro, but I was going to take the scenic route to get there first. Now with the term scenic, it was put in very lightly. Some of the streets were paved and others were of this cobblestone variety. Some of my favorite spots were the ones where you could see the oceans as cars drive towards it, and the part where the roads seemingly lead to this hidden drop-off point. The buildings themselves were like a bunch of pastel colors lined side by side in these long rows where you get a long, unobstructed view of a street. A lot of it reminded me of New Orleans' Bourbon Street and how the buildings are tightly knitted together but all had their own unique mark with the shops at the bottom and lodgings on top. But also, in that it was the blend of the old and the new that gave these spots their own unique charm. A good example of this is when I turned at the Plaza de Hostos to see the Promenade of the Princess, with all the shop vendors flanking both sides of the walkway selling their wares with these old stonework walls and vibrantly colored homes as a backdrop. The path eventually leads to the Roots Fountain, which was a good spot to see some beautiful surroundings. After getting my shots, I headed up north to the Old Fort, which was awesome because I had some awesome oceanside views to my left and these giant stone walls to my right. Unfortunately, my oceanside trail was cut short as a big portion of the path was closed down, so I wasn't able to walk it all the way up to the Old Fort. But it was all good because there was one of the original gates to the old city, which was the historic San Juan Gate, which I went through to see more of these beautiful homes and buildings. The other bonus of this alternative route was being able to go in these sentry boxes or watch points to view through the slit and imagine someone else that was in the same spot hundreds of years ago. Eventually the main path led up to this well-manicured hill with the Castillo San Felipe del Morro on the top of it. One of the first things I noticed was the size of the fort. Now I knew it was going to be big, but it was a different thing altogether when I got up to the front gate. The best way I can explain it is that the fort is comprised of 6 levels, with many nooks and crannies throughout. Getting through the admission is a short affair where you'll find a small courtyard. In this area, you can go to different areas where you can learn more about the fort and how it was like within those walls. On an interesting note, the fort took over 200 years to be completed, and during that time, it went through a lot of renovations and some battles. For me, I wanted to start from the top and make my way to the bottom. So I went up this ramp to get a good look of the surrounding area and enjoy the ocean breeze. At some points there were some steps that made it easier to climb on top of the walls. I had to be careful though because some of the stonework was more deteriorated at some areas than others. But there were some brave folks who got pretty close to the edges of the walls. Outside of some minor risk taking, I worked my way down to the lower floors where I checked out some of the museum pieces, but honestly, I was just enjoying the views more because of how much history was on both sides of the walls. I just wish I had a time machine to see how it looked like back in its heyday. After getting my fill of Fort Morro, I set off for the next cool site, which wasn't too far at all. I ended up relaxing for a minute on the soft grass to enjoy the warm sun while hearing the ocean waves on the other side. When I set off again, I followed the north wall, making some stops at some neat sites like the Bastion de San Antonio, the Santa Maria Cemetery, and some other eye-catching spots. After a bit of walking, I reached the Castillo San Cristobal. Now this is a hot tip in case you want to visit both forts. If you paid admission and kept your receipt at one, you can use that same receipt at the other fort, so do that if you want to save some money. But back to the tour. So after showing my Morro receipt, I got into the exploration mode to cover all the accessible parts of this fort. Now the main difference between Morro and Cristobal is that Morro was made for sea defense, and Cristobal was made as a result of 2 land-based attacks on San Juan. As for the size, this place was deceivingly big. The multiple levels and tunnels made walking this place a bit of a hike, but easily doable. I would definitely suggest wearing a good pair of shoes, as this place seemed a little bit more difficult to walk than Fort Morro. Outside of the two, I think Morro was a cooler looking fort. If you want to learn more about the two forts, check the links in the description. After absorbing the amazing views of the Cristobal, I went to this nice food joint where I got some good drinks and a good burrito that had this delicious chipotle mayo sauce on the inside. After stuffing my face, it was kind of getting late, so I decided to head back to my room and relax and prep for the next day. Now for this day, I was wanting to catch up on some of the stuff I missed in Old Town. With that in mind, I got an Uber back to Plaza Colón again, then headed west catching some of the things that I missed. The first was a Balaha, which at the time was hosting an art show with pieces from various artists, which was a treat because I love art and I love all the different mediums that were on display. After this, I headed south to the Church of Jesus Christ to see this old place of worship. A nice bonus of this visit was seeing all these pigeons relaxing in these crevices in the wall, almost like it was like made for them. The area also seemed popular for feeding the pigeons that lived there. It wasn't until later I discovered that the area was called Pigeon Park. Next on the list was the Calle de la Fortaleza, which at the time had these bells hanging over the street instead of the umbrellas that are usually there. Also, the street was closed at the time of my visit, so couldn't do much else after that. So I then headed east along the south side of Old Town, passing by some of the cruise ship ports, which at the time had no ships, so there wasn't a lot of people crowding this area. After a bit of walking, I made it to the capital of Puerto Rico. At the time, I was having some work done on it, but hey, it was just nice being able to see it and admire the style of the building. With all the main sites out of the way, I just went on a lazy stroll to go to the beach, walking along the north side of Old Town to reach the El Escabron beach, where I just relaxed, taking in some of the awesome beach views, old fort walls, and just enjoying that nice cool breeze on this particularly warm day. After that, I just headed to Lote 23, where I got to have some mofongo with some side steak. Once my belly was full, I just headed back to my room to get some rest before I had to wake up early for my flight. There was one last treat that this trip was able to give me, which was the sights coming back home. Luckily, I was able to snag a nice cheap window seat where I was able to get a chance to see all the islands that we were flying by. It was fun seeing the boats cruising the ocean not too far off from some island nearby. Or my favorite bit was just how clear the water was at certain spots. For instance, on this day, there was a lot of partial clouds just floating around. So we were able to see those shadows of those clouds through that clear water. It almost looked like a bunch of mini islands just everywhere. Other than that, it was a nice smooth ride to get back to my usual stomping grounds. Overall, I love this trip. I just wish I had a couple more days to see more of the stuff I missed outside of Old Town. The history, the food, and the folks were amazing here, and I could not have asked for a better trip. I would suggest that if you do plan on going to Puerto Rico, be sure to check if your cell phone company provides service here. I didn't do my research on that part, so I had to rely on free Wi-Fi throughout the trip, which was tough. With that said, y'all stay safe and have a good one.